Mr. Bell, I just want to say thank you, and it's an honor for me to just be breaking bread with you. You have had a tremendous 2 days, one in Harlem and also in Brooklyn. And this documentary is really getting ready to put you, Mr. Clay, and Mr. Rush in a whole nother stratosphere.
It is, and we're so happy about it because It's for a good cause. It's about the kids and passing the torch on and working the different genres and crossing genres in the music. So this has been great. This is what we envisioned when we started the film. Yes.
You know, I want to go into this movie because there's layers of this. You said it's about the next generation in the meshing because you have a song where you collaborated with Snoop Dogg, but it's also an appreciation of how important Memphis roots music in the Mississippi Delta is to the American culture.
It really is. I mean, as Otis Clay said in the film, that it's not a generation gap, it's a communication gap. And when you cross the genres, you realize it's the same story. The rappers are talking about the same story in their own way and creating the beats. And we did it in soul music before us. The blues artists did it, and then gospel did it before us. So, and jazz, and in every area you go into, even country. So when we started looking at this, we realized that, and we said, oh, this is broader than just tracing the origin of music. This is crossing the dividing lines that we've put in place. We can cross those lines and bring it to another generation through another way. And in doing so, and working with Snoop and other rappers, Yo Gotti and Frazier Boy and Al Capone and all in the movie, this has just been a wonderful experience. It's been a learning experience for the older people. It's been a learning experience for the younger guys because a lot of them had never worked with live bands. And that's a way of life for us back in the old school. So we taught them that that's a great thing to be able to bounce ideas off of another writer, musician, or singer within a studio environment rather than doing everything yourself in the basement or at home or even in the studio where you're being the producer, the writer, the artist, and creating everything. But when you can get another artist's input, another member's input, it makes the music and the songs and the idea more relevant because you're getting a lot of different inputs into that one idea. And as long as you find that you're all shooting for the same goal, to make this the best song, the best recording that you can make. And they realized that, and a lot of the rappers came and said, I'll never work with a track again. Because it gives you freedom out there. You know, you can break it down, you can have a talk with the audience and everything and not worry about, I got to catch this track at this interval, you know. So it's been good. It's been just a labor of love for us.
You know, William, one of the things about this documentary, and I asked Mr. Rush as well as Mr. Clay about the importance of Bobby Blue Bland. When people see this, they're going to see this is one of our heroes in the music. And I think I told this, Mr. Rush, Bobby Blue Bland to black rhythm and blues was to Bing Crosby was to popular music.
Absolutely. And I have been fortunate enough when I came along, because I started early at 14 in Memphis there off Beale Street. I had actually a gig at the Flamingo Room there with Old Man Phineas Newborn's band, and he had like a 14-piece orchestra with Hank Crawford and Charles Lloyd and all these people in it. But I met Bobby and BB, and they just kind of took me under their wings, and they're like surrogate fathers, and Rufus Thomas. So it's just wonderful to see, number one, that Bobby was recognized before he passed. Hubert Sumling was recognized before he passed. And Willie Mitchell, you know, there's a new generation that know who the man was behind the Al Green hits and all that. So it's just wonderful to be able to pass that knowledge on to another generation, and then they can pass it on to yet another generation. And that's what it's about, to carry that torch on and keep the music going.
Now, I graduated from Memphis State University, and one of the things that I know about Memphis, and you grew up being a native Memphian,
Right.
Memphis was about W.C. Handy and the Blues. It was about Mr. Sam Phillips and Rockabilly. And it was about the mighty WDIA, which
Right.
was the voice of black, the first African artist.
Yes. DIA was the first, and they had A.C. Williams, Nat D. Williams, Muha, and Honey Boy, and all those. Rufus Thomas, he was a disc jockey there. So that's where I first met BB. We were in a group, a choral group that A.C. Williams had, who was a jock, and called the Teen Town Singers. Me, Carla Thomas, Isaac Hayes, David Porter, and BB had a Saturday radio show called the Pepticon Show, which was a product to make so he had the Pepticon Show for 15 minutes. So we would come on before he came on and do the Teen Town singing thing, and that's how we all met at DIA, and it was just wonderful. Nat D. Williams was not only a disc jockey, but he was also a teacher at Booker T. Washington High School, and of course, so that connection there runs deep. Yeah.
And Sam, there was another radio station that was playing Negro music to white fans.
WREC, Dewey Phillips. He played
Red Hot and Cool.
Red, Hot, and Blue. Yeah. And he played Elvis's first record. He would play our stuff against the grain, because back in those days, our music was called race music. And thank God for DIA, and in Atlanta, they had WLOK in Atlanta, and they had WERD, which was right next door to Dr. King's office. And so Alley Pat and all those disc jockeys played us religiously. We didn't have many stations, but we catered to the community. And they were instrumental. And when Elvis came along, of course, Dewey played Elvis. Now, there was one other station in Nashville.
John R. was a famous DJ.
John R., yeah, and Hugh Baby, Big Hugh Baby. You could hear them all across the U.S. late at night. And they would play Stax Records. They would play the stuff coming out of Sun Records and everything. And they would play the gospel music, Sister Rosetta Tharpe and all those. And so that's important, that those stations said they wanted to just not look at it as a racial issue. They were more into the music. And they played a song because the audience loved the song and they loved the song, and they caught flack, but they persevered, and I knew Dewey Phillips well, and of course I knew Elvis, his cronies, and we're still friends. I get calls now.
How's George Klein?
George Klein and I had about a 2-hour. He's got a show on Sirius XM now called the Elvis Hour. So he called me for an interview, and we just talked for 2 hours about Elvis and the behind-the-scenes thing, playing touch football, sometime in the skating rinks, the things that we did that the public wouldn't normally know about. Because Elvis used to come to the Flamingo Room where I was performing, and he would sit in the back and watch us perform. And he had a genuine love for gospel and blues and R&B music, and he patterned his style after of all people, Roy Hamilton. Listen to early Roy Hamilton, you hear Elvis. All that hula hula, all Roy Hamilton was doing that way back then. And Elvis acknowledged that. Roy Hamilton was his favorite singer, he and Jackie Wilson.
He paid for Jackie Wilson's funeral.
Yeah. So
no, he didn't pay for funeral. He paid for his medical expenses.
Medical expenses. Yeah. But a lot of people don't know that. And then, but we all grew up together because Rufus started his career at Sun Records in Memphis.
Ike Turner did.
Yeah, Ike Turner did. Yeah. And so Rufus moved over to Stax, of course, with Carla and his daughter and everything. And there is a history of those genres being crossed, but it was not fashionable back in the day. And did we catch flack from it? Yes. But inside those studios and inside the music clubs and everything, Ronnie Millsap and all of them, Steve Duck and Booker and I would go down and at the Thunderbird where Ronnie worked and jam with him at night. And Ronnie signed with Stax for a while before he went country. So a lot of people don't know. Yeah, we all knew Charlie Rich and I were good friends.
Ask you some things, William, about the vocal changes, because the 50s you had Roy Hamilton, you had Nat King Cole, and you had a man who I think was getting ready to be the pop Nat Cole, but he was killed in a car accident, Jesse Belvin.
Yes.
And then the 60s paved way to more Otis Redding, The Wicked Pickett,
right,
James Brown,
right.
You. What was happening as far as the organic nature of the styles of singing then?
We were right out of church. I started my career in church at 7 years old, singing in the choir, and then I graduated into doing lead singing with the choir singing behind me. So we all, Sam and Dave, all of us, we start Sam, of course, Sam Cooke, Soul Stirrers, and all that. Lou Rawls, we all started in gospel music, so it's in us. So when we got to where it was being accepted by the masses, and there was a couple of labels that was willing to record it, of course, we did what came natural. We just expressed what we were feeling. That's because at any given time, that's why they say it's soul music, because most soul singers never sang the same song the same way if you cut a certain track, because it's all in the moment and what you're feeling at for a lyric or a storyline at that given time when you're singing. And it changes from time to time, because every time you sing it, you're going to feel it a little bit different. So we came out of church, so you got that gospel influence. We were influenced early on by church, gospel, country, Hank Williams and all that. He was out of church, and Charlie Rich, all these gospel singers. Elvis loved gospel music. Some of his relaxing times after he got through with the concert was going back and finding a piano and getting with the background singers and singing gospel songs. That's how he wound down. And that was just in us and innately. I mean, through osmosis or what, we grew up on it. We heard it all of our lives. And when we started singing, and they used to laugh, they said, well, the same people that buy a soul record or an R&B record, those same people go to church on Sunday morning. And they do. I've had preachers that preach sermons on trying to love too, but he's relating it to God and the devil. You can't love two things. He preached on you don't miss your water. I've had preachers. So they take those titles and ideas and turn them into something that people can relate to and understand and take home with them. And that's what we did. We just did what came natural. And Otis, all of his stuff was just from the heart and from the gut and soul felt. And Solomon, James Brown, please, please, please. I mean,
That was church.
church all day long. The Five Royals, you can go there. Then they had the smooth singers like the Flamingos and all those that that polished it up with the fancy chords and everything. And we all were evolving during those days. But basically, Motown, that thing, most of Motown's acts came from the South. And most people, Temptation from Birmingham. So they take it up to Motown. Now, Motown want to make it for Mid-America, so they polished it up. Made it to where it was palatable for Mid-America. White audiences didn't feel threatened by it. And so that was the difference between Motown, but most of those acts came out of church.
at the venue, whirlwind, your girl, look at the menu. Chocolate hearts, yellow moons, living the life, silver spoons, having it all, having a ball. In love with the alcohol, dog. Time to tell if I fail. Pick up the cell, call Willie Bell, cause he's one of my big brothers. I got to be your lover. MIC, beat the beat, late night, what it do? Baby girl, I'm in love with you. I'm trying to do what I'm supposed to do. I need you close to me, toast with me, flow with me. Baby girl, you get the most of me. Now teach me how to learn to love, cause I don't ever want to forget how to make you feel. For fun, for fake, for real, for real, for real, for real. You, me, I feel like there's no other. Forgive me, girl, cause I got to be your lover, your lover, your lover. Just a little love. Whoa,
Jim Stewart and the Still Axtons started Stax Records in 1957-58. And one of the most important things that Stax had in a very segregated world in the South, it produced some of the most integrated records that really liberated the soul.
It did. I'd say they changed the world because music is a good catalyst for changing people's heart. And Jim and Estelle, even back then, they didn't see color. It was like, what can you bring to the table in terms of musical abilities? And they gave us a chance to come into that building and be creative, hone our craft, and act as, I call Estelle, she was like a mother figure to us, because she would fight tooth and nail to get things happening, get our records on board and all this, and of course it was, back in those days, that was unheard of. And they caught flack in a sense too, but they persevered and said, hey, we've got something here and it's a good thing, we're following it through. And it was a place, it was like an oasis in the middle of a desert for us, because we could come into that building and forget all of the turmoil that was going on outside of the building. But when we walk out, it hit us in the face, but we were more able to deal with it then, because, you know, as coming from a deprived area in South Memphis, and the Stax Records was right in the heart of the ghetto, so it's not, you know, it's right there on McLemore and College, so we saw it all. We saw the good and the bad and the indifferent on both sides of the races, because, you know, it wasn't just one-sided. Some black folks said, what are you doing over there? You know, so we made a difference because we banded together despite all of the obstacles that were coming at us, and said, and when the records started coming and the radio started playing them, all of a sudden the whole neighborhood changed with respect. And it was a good thing up to the point that Dr. King was killed, and then it started changing again. But they were just wonderful, and there's not enough. I wish one day they would do a movie or something about just Jim and Estelle, because they were instrumental in giving us, encouraging us, and working with us. Jim was a country fiddle player and a banker. Estelle was a housewife, a mother. Her son played in a band that they loved black music. So they started a record company to do that. And I can't say enough about them pooling their finances together and their expertise together. Yeah, they picked our brain to find out, as young people, what's popular now in the record business. And we, as 15, 16-year-old kids, you know, we hung outside of the record shop on the street, and she would play a record, and then she'd come out, what do you like about that record? Why are you dancing to it? Is the beat right? And yeah, so they were learning. We were learning and having an opportunity to get in there and carve out a career. And because of that, you know, we convinced the whole nation that this was a viable music.
You, David Porter, and Isaac Hayes are in the great pantheon of songwriters. And you guys were young. You guys were really writing about love. And, you know, Isaac Hayes did something that was very unique. He shaved his head, and he brought black pride into the mix.
Absolutely, absolutely. Isaac was one of those individuals. He was an individualist. And that's what makes an artist to me, you know, not a copy, but be an individual. And that's why his talents shone through on his writing, on his singing. And he was always, as part of the Teen Town Singers, he was that way. He was, as teenagers, we called him a little strange, because he would come in with a blue tennis and a white tennis on. He'd have a yellow sock and a red sock, because he was making a statement. I'm an individualist. I don't conform to the norm.
He was the Black Moses.
Yeah, absolutely. And we respected that, because he brought something in talent-wise to it. And then so that is something that I will always value in him and in David and in any artist, that have pride in what in believability in what you're doing, even when the whole world might be against you. But if you know that you are doing a viable thing, and keep doing it, because it might take you longer to get there if you're not copying something else. But when you get there, you'll have staying power. And Isaac had that. And even when his dress code, when he got popular, who would think somebody come out with tights and chains on? Everybody else wearing little tight suits long before they were skinny leg and tight. We were wearing them back then, skinny ties and mohair suits and stuff. So he shaved his head. Yeah. And you think about somebody like Sam Cooke. He brought in the afro. Back then we had doing the dyed and fried and all that stuff.
Right.
And they said, no, you don't have to be like that to prove that you've got a talent. Cut your hair off and let it grow natural. And when Sam did it, he's everybody's hero, so everybody, okay, I'm going to be like Sam. I'm going to let it just grow up here. And so, but that's having enough courage to be an individualist. And so I really value that in any artist that does that, and I try to do as much of that as I can, even when different songs come about or different types of things are in. I don't try to not to follow the trends. I stick with what I do best. And the originality of what I do, and so that's why I think, and it's genuine. People buy truth, and I try to be true to my craft. I try to be responsible to the stuff that I put out there in the airways, because a lot of people, you influence a lot of people, young people, old people, and everything. When people come up to me and say, I met my wife and our first child was born because of this song and that song, hey, I don't take that lightly, because you've been a part of a person's life, and so that's why you should take things seriously, because you are influencing generations.
I Forgot to Be Your Lover. Very, very, very big hit. The thing about you've been smooth. Your style, your singing voice, it's been very, very smooth. There's a thing that I really did not like about what has happened to the politics of the music. Politics of the music has gotten more raunchy now in this generation, but you guys were about love and romance. What has happened in the dynamic and the balance change?
Well, kids nowadays, they don't have a lot of patience, number one. You look at movies, it transcends in everything we see on television, the commercials, or a movie. Every 3 seconds, there's a scene change. So you don't have a visual thing the way you can lock into anything long enough. So everything is cut and dry, boom, 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 boom. But you have to stop and smell the roses, and take stuff in, be able to think about it, process it, and figure out what it means in terms of your own self, and as well as what it'll mean to somebody else, or your kid, or whatever. And so by the process of everything being quick, snap judgment, we don't have time for this, or the respect of yourself or a woman, and calling her the B word or the W word and all that. No. You can express yourself, whether you're angry, sad, or whatever. You can express it in a way that people know that you mean business, but you don't have to be vulgar about it. And this is what I tell young people. I said, hey, everybody gets angry. Everybody, there's a disappointing downside to everybody. You're human. That's the human quality in all of us. But it's how you react to it, how you talk to people. You can say anything that you want to and make that a definitive statement without being angry or vulgar about it, and what you put out there, you're going to get that back. So we've got a lot of violence now, because why? Our work, the body of work is violent, I'll come by and drive by and blow you away and blah, blah, blah. Even in a commercial, everything is, it's an impact. You hitting something, or no, even in love, the guy, let me hit it. Hey, but we express love in a different way. It's not a utopian way, but it's a way that your partner will respond to you in a positive way, as opposed to let me hit it, let me caress you, and then take the time to make that a special thing, as opposed to hit and run, so I try to talk to the young people, and then the ones that listen, and sometimes they are, that's old school, man. We're quick to do this now. I ain't got time to do all that. But then they come back later on. You know what? You're right. And I laugh. I laugh at myself. I knew it would soak in when you get home and close the door and you by yourself, or when you lay down in the bed. You know what that old man said? It makes sense. So I'll call up my lady and I'm sorry, and let me just come over and let's see if we can make this right. And relationships, it transcends into your work ethics, everything. You got to be proud of what you do. If you don't do but one job, do it good. And that was taught to me by my parents and everything, and then so we've got to recreate that into young people. Said, hey, if you're digging a ditch, dig the best ditch that you can dig. Say, laying a bricklayer. Hey, and let everybody talk about, wow, he's awesome. You know, be an artist in your own right in whatever you do. If you're picking up garbage, hey, be proud of what you're doing.